a wonderful warm day in Davos that we're experiencing here. I'm very honored and privileged to have Mr. Caspar Herzberg with us here today in the Youth Majlis in Davos. Mr. Caspar joined AVEVA in 2001 with more than 25 years of software and industry experience. He's a leader across multiple industries and has been working on multiple new fronts. And he's the author of Smart Cities and Digital Nations. Thank you very much for being with us here today, and thank you very much for being part of the Youth Majlis.
My pleasure. Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Thank you
It's an
very
honor.
much.
Yeah.
I always forget to do this, but my name is Amani Al-Khiyami,
أهلاً
and
بيك.
I work
Yes.
here at the MISC Foundation and on global partnerships. As always, when meeting with exceptional leaders such as yourself, we always want to know more about your journey. How did you get to where you are? Where are you from? I think the audience online as well would love to hear about that.
Sure. So, thank you. Thank you for Dr. Badr for inviting me. Wassalamu alaikum. I want to say that the journey starts usually at the beginning. And the beginning for me to grow up in Egypt as a German kid in a house that was far away from the city. This is important because it meant that I was not in a diplomatic quarter, or I was not far away. I was not with a lot of other expat kids. I was with a lot of Egyptian kids, many of them on the street. And that meant two things. One, that I learned how to survive in the street, although I didn't come from the street, if you like. And secondly, I learned how to speak Arabic, مصري. أنا بكلم مصري. This has helped me a lot.
المفروض نعمل الحوار بالعربي.
هذا ما تحت أمرك يعني.
الله يخليك.
هذا هيبقى شرف.
أهلا وسهلا.
But yeah. The second thing is that when you grow up today we're in an environment where a lot of people from the Middle East globally have moved to the West, where there's a lot of interchange. Yeah, I guess at my time this was not that common, and this has from an early age given me an appreciation for not just Egypt, Islam, Muslim culture, but also an appreciation that how it is to be different, right? And that means that one of the big things that I always focused on my career is that you treat everyone the same way, you see, irrespective of whether they are from where you are from. And this is maybe because I always struggled, because there were not that many German kids that grew up in Egypt and spent 20 years there, like I did, right? There are exactly 3, so there's 2 others out there somewhere, roaming the world. So I then did the normal things. I actually went to the army in Germany for 2 years. I then studied in England, and then I worked for first a consultancy for a number of years. That work got me back to the region, got me back to actually first to Oman. So I worked in oil in Oman, and then at some point I got a call from a leading technology company to return to the Middle East, and I've worked there. And I've actually lived there then 17 years, operating out of the region, working in Saudi, working in Middle East and Africa, working in Asia and China, Japan, and recently I returned back to the UK. So this is my career in summary. And as you move around and as you interface and interact with many different people from many different places, old people, young people, old leaders, young leaders, happy people, very angry people, you learn a lot about the world, how things work, how things don't work, and you try to apply it, throughout your journey, and eventually it gets you to sit here with you and you interview me, and it's a great moment, frankly. Yeah.
Next time I get to tell you about how I got to be able to speak to you. But mashallah, what a wonderful and really rich experience that I don't think very unique to a lot of people. And I think, I would love to hear then, since you grew up in Egypt and you've been in the Middle East for quite a large portion of time, and you went and you came back, what has kind of transformed on your vision of how the region has evolved, what your leadership style in any sense has changed between moving from country to country?
So something that I learned early on is that you, as a leader, to be successful, you need to build trust and you need to be able to delegate. Because if you concentrate power in yourself, while it makes you indispensable, it ultimately just means that you get less done, and eventually it overloads you. and eventually you fail. People might not notice that you fail, but you fail. Sometimes you can stay on for decades, but you have failed. And the world is full of such leaders, right? So, but in order to delegate, you have to spend time with the people that execute, and you have to learn about them, you have to understand them, and you have to not just get their trust, but also understand how much. You have to make them understand what you want to achieve, and also we don't work in a vacuum. I mean, we all report to someone. There's always either an individual or a group of leaders that you report to. So you have to very often be a bridge between what the overall direction, let's say, of a country, of a company, of a group. Eventually you set maybe the direction for the group, right? And then you have to explain that to the people, and you have to take the time to really explain it. And then you have to allow them to make decisions, and you have to live with their mistakes, and you have to accept their mistakes, and you have to, at least for the first or second mistake, accept it. If somebody makes 10 mistakes in a row, eventually it's time to reassess, But that's something that is not necessarily intrinsic to how things work in the Middle East, as we all know, right? And I think what I have seen, since you ask what has changed in the last 20 years, that certainly in some countries, the youth has taken a much bigger role in decision making, and leaders are more comfortable with their decision making. This is a change I have seen. It's more pronounced in some countries. It's less pronounced in others. It's significantly less pronounced in some countries, right? But if you ask me overall, what has changed, it is a realization that young leaders, young people, are not just there to be led. They are also decision makers in their own right. And if you let them make decisions, your country, your economy, your society prospers, right? And I think this is this journey I have observed.
That is absolutely wonderful, and I love that you started kind of your statement with trust, which is basically a profound topic here at the World Economic Forum and here in Davos. And is that a core value in your leadership style? And can you tell us more about that?
So I would say that the first thing is before you expect things of others, you have to expect things of yourself, right? And the way you build trust is by doing what you say, good and bad. As long as people know what they will get from you, you establish trust, transparency, because they know that in this situation you will react this way, and there is nothing worse than an erratic leadership style, right? For anyone, also for the person that is exhibiting the erratic leadership style, because it's usually because they don't get the things done that they want to get, that they want to do. So first thing is do what you say, right? Second thing is, yes, do trust and let people fail, and don't punish them when they fail. Yeah? And live with the fact that very often things don't happen exactly the way you want, or things don't get said the way you want. I lead a fairly large organization now, and I can assure you that many of my leaders do not say things the way I want, at all. At all. Yeah, and sometimes, but overall though, they are able quite well to advance our interests. I mean, we're an industrial software company, so most of the world's machinery relies in some form on our software. So it's from Japan to the Middle East to California. There's I think 2 sanctioned countries that don't use us. Everybody else does. So you get around. It also means you have many different leaders that you work with, many different countries, right? They say things they want their way. They execute very often in different ways, and why we want to have common standards, a common framework for people to operate in. I mean, it's not the Wild West. I do give them significant freedom, with a couple of core tenets, of course, compliance and so on, to get things done, and that does work rather well for us. Yeah.
That's wonderful. I think what you said earlier, almost giving people permission and space to fail and learn from their mistakes. But how did that differ from leaders in your organizations and the younger generation in your organization?
how does it differ? How?
How,
Like,
in terms of how you operate and lead them?
so in this case, I mean, we are a organization very heavy on engineers, and engineers are very black and white. Yeah, it is a very
There might be quite a few engineers
very true.
in the audience.
But we all know it's very true, right? So that means also from a managerial style.
She's engineer, she's white. I'm engineer, I'm white. All of us.
The point being, they make decisions very binary, right? And they also expect their teams to be very, very binary very often. And frankly, this at the mid-level, this is not always necessarily very easy for the new generation to operate in. So one of the big efforts we make is educating our mid-level managers on in management, allowing different scales of gray, right? So that's a big focus for us, because one of the big challenges we have as an industry, so this is not just us, is how to attract young people to work in let's say deep technology, right? That is a big problem for us, yeah, to bring them on board and to keep them, yeah.
But that's a very good point on retention as well, and I really appreciate what you're saying on kind of having levels of gray. And I don't think it's just engineers. I think it's a lot of different young people as well who are looking at leaders like yourself and thinking to themselves of how do I lead? What are the core the capabilities that I need to equip myself with? And here in the Majlis, we've talked about a little bit on the relationship of trust between leaders and young people, something that you might have seen on your journey here. And we wanted to get a sense from you of what do you think are some of the priorities that young people are to be really focused on to tackle the challenges of today. We want to understand, build bridges between leaders and young people, but we also rely on older generations and leaders to be mentors and to really show the way for the generations to come.
There is, and part of this has to do with technology. There is quite a significant gap today. There's probably a bigger gap between the generation that enters the workforce now and the leaders than there's ever been, right? They consume information differently. They spend a significant amount of their time not just on the mobile, but on completely different sources of information than the older generation consumes, right? They learn differently. Their attention span is different. And interestingly enough, we find that is the same whether you are in Japan or whether you are in China or whether you are in the West or whether you are in the Middle East, right? So I think it's not necessarily just the young generation that has to learn things or be different. I think in this case it is more the leaders who have to understand how to not lose completely the young generation, because frankly what usually happens when there is a massive generational gap is eventually unrest and revolution. This is what has happened in the past. So I am of the mindset that it is less about you young people have to spend more time training, you need to increase your attention span, you need to learn business etiquette better and so on, which is very often what gets put out. I think it is more for, I guess, us to learn how do we appeal to them, how do we use how do we use social media, their ways of gathering information to train them on the things that we want them to learn and know, right? Yeah. So I see the action more on us than on them, frankly.
I love that you say that, because yesterday we had this conversation here in the Majlis where there was a lot of conversation of bringing youth to the table or meeting youth where they are, and kind of a conclusion of the conversation is how do we meet in the middle? What in your views are some of the ways we can do that? Where do we get the right kind of that sweet spot where we're bringing the leaders together with young people?
So, this is a big question, and clearly one that many people approach, and many people are trying to solve, right? I can just tell you what we do. We do bring a lot of interns in as an organization. We do realize that they want to have an interesting environment, right? So it's work, but it should also be fun for them, right? One of the big issues we've had, at least in the West, is the withdrawal from the office that happened during COVID and was empowered by Zoom and all these things, right? The reality was, unfortunately, that we have our interns in offices that are empty because everybody works from home. This is not a positive experience. Yeah. This is not just us. This is a big issue across the West. So forcing our people to come back to the office, forcing everyone to work together, forcing the interaction between the generations, not just in like leadership, meet the leader type things, because that only goes so far, but in day-to-day work, making leaders accessible at every level. So not just me, just specifically actually what we call the N-2 and N-3 level of leaders, right? Because they are the ones who have to be most accessible. And that kind of creates, again, that trust and that good experience that people ultimately seek. And I think the first step is to understand this. The second step is to make it happen. That's quite hard. Yeah.
And that's a great segue to, unfortunately, our last question, because I know we're running out of time, is in your journey as a third culture kid who grew up in Egypt and traveled all over the world and worked in the Middle East for quite a long time, who do you consider are the best qualities of your mentors, and how do you mentee?
Definitely the best quality of my mentors has been patience. Yeah, patience with me, listening to me, being angry, being happy, doing stupid things. This is, I think patience is patience, and the second good quality in a mentor is to give good advice. Yeah, to give good long-term advice, and sometimes to give quite cold advice and tell you things you don't necessarily want to hear. Yeah, it's surprisingly difficult to tell someone, especially someone you care about, and that's often what happens in a mentor-mentee relationship, the truth about matters, right? How not to fail, right? So,
how do you choose your mentees?
How do you choose your mentees? I think you should choose your mentees not by whether you click with them firsthand, or I think you should just assign yourself mentees and learn from them and have them teach you and you teach them. One thing I learned in the army is you get the team you get. You don't get the team you choose. Like we all think as leaders, I choose my team, I want the best people, and I just work with the best people. This is not the reality. And especially in mentor-mentee relationships, this is, the best thing you can do as a mentor is just randomly assign people or have them assigned and then learn from them as they learn from you.
I absolutely love that. Thank you so much. شكرا جزيلا أستاذ كاسبر. شكرا لك لحضورك معنا. Thank you very much for being here with us in the Youth Majlis in Davos, and hope to see you very, very soon in other events, inshallah.